Hey, I'm Andrew with 10 Minute Therapy, and in today's video, we're going to take a dive back into the topic of anxiety. And specifically, we're going to look at why anxiety feels so real, even though it isn't. Now, before we go any farther, let me just say, if you're interested in learning more about anxiety, we have thoroughly covered this topic. Go into our YouTube channel, go back to the folders and find the one titled Anxiety, and you'll see that we have covered topics about anxiety-related disorders, top-down anxiety, bottom-up anxiety, etc. If you have an interest in anxiety, I highly encourage you to learn some more and get to know more about what's going on. But for today's video purposes, we're going to look at just briefly why anxiety feels so real. Why does anxiety feel so real even when it's not? Now, before we go farther into that topic, let me clarify what I mean when I suggest that it's not real. Here's what I'm not saying. I'm not suggesting that you're delusional, that you're not actually anxious. If you've experienced anxiety, and all of us have at some point or another, you know that it is very real. So I'm not minimizing or invalidating your experience. What I'm suggesting is that anxiety feels real even when you're not actually in any danger or in harm's way at all. And so it feels real even when it's not. The threat, the worry, the concern, those parts are real, but you may not actually be in any danger or in any dangerous position. And so why does anxiety feel so real even when it's not? So the first reason that we have to start with is really just the way your brain and my brain are designed to work. And that is to say that deep in the recesses of your brain is what we call a limbic system. And within that limbic system is something called your amygdala. And your amygdala's job is to constantly scan your environment for threats of danger. In other words, your brain is wired to regularly be looking out for danger. And here's a fun fact, an interesting factoid. That part of your brain is fully functional the moment you're born. Now, we know from neuroscience that the human brain takes approximately 25 years to fully develop and mature. But that part of your brain, that amygdala inside the limbic system, what we call your sympathetic nervous system, sometimes we call it a stress response system. Layman's terms would be your fight or flight response. That part of your brain is fully active at birth, and for your entire life, it is scanning and looking for danger. So why does anxiety feel so real? Because part of you is wired to always be on the lookout for danger. Part of you is wired to be watching and aware just in case you are in danger, and it's there to protect you and keep you safe. It's not a bad part of your brain. It's a good, healthy function. So why does anxiety feel so real? Because you're wired, your brain is wired to look for danger. Now, the second reason that anxiety feels so real, even when it's not, is because while our brains are designed to look for danger, they often mix the signals between perceived threat and actual threat. Let me say that again. Your brain, my brain, often mix up the signals between perceived threat and actual threat. We can perceive a threat that's not really a threat, but to your mind and to your body, it's real, even though you might be physically safe and not in any actual danger. So let's make this personal. Let's make it practical for just a moment. Let me give you an example. I want you to imagine that you're sitting safely at home, a place where you're calm, your happy place. You feel relaxed. You feel comfortable and confident there. Maybe it's sitting in your bed, scrolling through your phone, or sitting on the couch watching TV, or playing a video game, or cooking up something in the kitchen. But you're at home, you're safe. And you realize that tomorrow you have a big test at school, or a presentation at work, or a performance review. You have something tomorrow that you have a lot riding on. It's important that you do well, and you start to worry. What if I fail? What if I mess up? What if this throws off the trajectory of my life. I get kicked out of school. I lose my job. I don't get that raise that I desperately need. And all these what if statements start to play through your mind. What if this happens? And what happens then? And what would I do? And what if everyone leaves me and abandons me because I failed? And what if? Now, in this situation, you are physically safe. There is no danger, no threat to you right now. But your mind has become fixated on a what if spiral. And in that what if spiral, you've induced a state of panic in your body. You're physically safe, but there's a perceived threat, and your brain cannot tell the difference between that perceived threat, the what if, and actual danger. So why does anxiety feel so real? Because our brains often mix the signals and struggle to differentiate between perceived threats of danger and actual danger. Now, the third reason that we'll cover today as to why anxiety feels so real, even when it's not, is, as we already stated, your brain is wired to look for danger, and it often mixes up perceived threats of danger with actual danger. It doesn't often know the difference. But the third and final reason is that once that system is activated, it causes within your body visceral, physical, and physiological responses in your body. In other words, the perceived threat that's not an actual threat, once that triggers anxiety and response in the body, you're physically feeling very real physiological responses. Your heart rate increases rapidly and not only pumps faster, but pumps stronger, which is why it feels in a moment of panic like your heart is going to come out of your chest. In addition to that, your lungs breathe faster and more shallow. Your muscles tense for action. Your body temperature increases. Your blood pressure increases. Your digestive tract locks up tight. All of these things happen in the blink of an eye. And so anxiety feels real because to your body in that moment, it is extremely real. And all those symptoms are very disconcerting. They're very alarming. They don't physically feel good. So why does anxiety feel so real? Because when your brain gets the signal wrong, your physical body pays the price. And what you are feeling is physically, viscerally, and physiologically very real. Now, so why does anxiety feel so real even when it's not? Because you're wired to look for danger in order to keep you safe. Number two, because your brain often makes the mistake, like mine, of not understanding the difference between a perceived threat and an actual threat. And number three, this one's important because your physical body then responds and reacts in ways that are deeply distressing and discomforting. And for these reasons, and probably many more, anxiety feels very real even when it's not, even when you're safe, even when you're not in actual danger. Now, we don't want to end the video here today and just stop with some information that's helpful but doesn't tell us what to do with it. And so I want to close today by starting to look at some practical pieces that we can do when our bodies and our minds are reacting in ways that are very real to threats of danger that are not. So what do we do with anxiety? What's a practical takeaway today? If we accept the information here that my body's not in any physical danger, but it's feeling very real things, there's two things I want to leave you with today. Number one, something I've said many times, I've probably stated it to every client I've ever worked with, and that is start with a focus on your breathing. Why is breathing so important? Because if your body is physiologically responding to a perceived threat of danger that is not real, then it's your job to focus on one thing that you can control, and that one thing is your breathing. Breathe deeply and slowly. Take back control of the physiological response. Slow the shallow breathing and force it to be deep and slow until your heart rate goes from rapid to slower to slower. You take control back of your breathing, focus on your breathing, and what you will find is you have far more control over managing the physiological symptoms of anxiety than you might have previously thought you did. And by focusing on those physical symptoms and controlling your breathing, you will be able to get back control of your body and slow down those very visceral, physical, physiological responses that are so distressing. And this next one is really important. In the previous video, we talked about why you have to win the battle of the body, slowing your breathing, but also win the battle of the mind. If anxiety feels real but isn't, because your brain mixes up a signal and thinks a perceived threat is a real threat, then one of the things you need to do is not just take back control of the symptoms and deal with the symptoms of anxiety, but instead we need to change perception. Now, I'm not against anxiety medications or people who take anxiety medications. I would never shame you or anyone who needs or requires anxiety medication. But listen to me closely. Anxiety medication cannot change your perception. Only you can do that part. So take control of your breathing, slow the physical symptoms, do some grounding exercises, do something to help get you out of that state. But the most important thing you can do is change your perception. If anxiety feels real because it's a perception of danger in a place where you're not physically in actual danger, then one of the best things you can do is change your perception. Help yourself see and remember, I'm not in danger. I'm okay. These what if thoughts are just thoughts. They are not reality. I don't actually have the ability to predict the future, even though I engage at times in predictive thinking. Help yourself win the battle of the mind by changing your perception. Thank you for joining us for 10-Minute Therapy. I'm excited that we're up and running again on this channel. As I said before, if you want to learn more about anxiety, go to our anxiety folder, dig through the videos, and start to learn more about the nuances of anxiety. Because listen, it feels real to you in the moment and to your body and mind. But when you're not in actual danger, that system is firing and misfiring at a time when we don't need it to. Take back control, win the battle of your mind, win the battle of your body. Until next time, I'm Andrew with 10-Minute Therapy. God bless.